Listen, I did film and television studies at university for 3 years. I spent hours reading countless books and articles on subjects spanning from film all the way to television. Not a single one mentioned Hugh Grant once.
I achieved the hardest qualification across any university or college ever, a 2-1 in history. Let me tell you, the only thing that I learned was that we, as a society, have a history of denying and neglecting Hugh Grant's artistic and cultural relevance, not just in this country, but in the entire world.
I met Oscar at a Hugh Grant-themed event I put on at the Students' Union.
It felt as though Diggory and I were the only ones there, and we agreed that there was a Hugh Grant-shaped hole in academia.
We decided to put it right ourselves. We want to show people that he's an icon in acting.
We want to show people he's more than just a bumbling posh guy.
I'm Diggory Waite.
And I'm Oscar Beardmore-Gray. And this is...
Taking Hugh for Granted.
Hello, welcome to Taking Hugh for Granted, the show in which two Hugh Grant scholars watch every single film starring Hugh Grant and ask the simple question, is this film taking Hugh for granted? Is this film good on its own, or does it rely on the bumbling Brit for its acclaim? This week, we're talking about the rewrite, but first, Oscar, how the devil are you, mate?
I am very well, Diggory. I hope you're doing well too, mate. How are you?
I'm good. There's not much to report here, to be honest. It's been very dreary and wet. In England, and I've been housebound because I have absolutely nothing to do besides tweet from the Hugh Grant or the Taking Hugh for Granted Twitter page. And
hey, that is a full-time job in itself.
Let me tell you. Actually, that's a good point to ask people. If you are listening to this now and you're on Twitter or you're on Instagram, why don't you give us a follow? And also, if that's how you found us, let us know where you found us from. We want to know what's working and what's not. And also what you're listening on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify. Let us know all of that stuff. We'd love to hear from you. Just say hello. Just have a chat. DM us. Tweet us, whatever. So we're Taking Hugh on Twitter and we're at Taking Hugh for Granted on Instagram and Facebook. Yeah, anyway, get involved. Oscar, should we have a synopsis?
Let's have a synopsis.
Simon!
The Rewrite, directed by Marc Lawrence and released in 2014. Resting on his laurels for a 1999 smash hit melodrama entitled Paradise Misplaced, Oscar-winning screenwriter and one-hit Hollywood wonder Keith Michaels, played by Hugh Grant, is forced to leave sun-kissed LA and teach a screenwriting course in rainy Binghamton, New York. Once there, Keith takes a shine to Holly, played by Marisa Tomei, a hard-working single mother and hopeful writer who seems to see straight through him. Can Keith, the unrepentantly egocentric big fish out of water, find a true connection between himself and the small community he now finds himself in?
Right, Oscar, talking about the film, let's get straight down and dirty with it. It's The Rewrite, 2014. I actually learnt something pretty interesting about Hugh and university in this. So I was working recently at The Economist, just something I do every now and then. Yeah, no, it's no big deal. Just The Economist, you know, the famous paper. Anyway, so working at The Economist, and a young lady was sat next to me, and we were having a chat, and she says, "What do you do?" And I said, "Well, I have a Hugh Grant podcast," and she was obviously absolutely enthralled. I'd finished explaining what it was and woke her up. She then said to me, "Oh, I do know something about Hugh Grant, actually." She went to St Andrews University in Scotland, and Hugh Grant is banned from that university.
He's been no platformed.
Yeah, yeah. If it was slightly later, it would have been. In 2007, Hugh Grant went golfing in St Andrews, and there's an Alfred Dunhill Links Championship. So he went either to watch it or participate in some way. Anyway, that evening, or one of the evenings during this championship, he went into St Andrews and was pictured, I mean, the only way you can say it is draped in women, several of them, half his age. And there's another photo of him apparently kissing one. And they genuinely... So this film, The Rewrite, as we've just heard, he's very much a similar character. He's an older man, goes into a university setting, and it sort of kicks off with him fornicating with one of his students. And I just wondered whether Hugh perhaps had drawn on this real-life experience in St Andrews, Scotland.
We may well have. I mean, it's the biggest gasp moment of the entire film that is probably about 2 or 3 minutes in. And he meets a very nice young lady student, and then the next moment it cuts to him waking up next to her, and you're like, what on earth is going on here, Hugh?
Yeah, it's very, very, very naughty. It's very naughty. So he's a former Oscar winner, wrote a film called Paradise Misplaced, which I'm told we'll talk about a lot. He's out of luck, moves to Binghamton in New York University to become a writing teacher, and on his literal first day,
it's not even first day, it's like -1 day.
Yeah, before he's even started, he slept with one of his students, which is
which apparently he didn't know was against the rules, which I find hard to believe. But maybe his experience at St Andrews was he didn't know the rules there either. So,
Hey.
Good morning. I unfortunately have to go. I'm supposed to meet the head of the department.
Dr. Lerner, I had him for Chaucer.
When you say you had him for Chaucer...
This is really fun.
Yeah.
See you later.
Yeah. I like being a teacher.
Okay, so then let's talk maybe a bit about the opening and general thoughts on Hugh's character. Maybe have you got any of those hot takes for me?
Well, Hugh's character, he's slightly hard to get behind again, which is disappointing. The screenplay is written by Marc Lawrence, who actually is one of Hugh's big partners, along with Richard Curtis. He's starred in 4 of Hugh Lawrence's films, including Music and Lyrics, Did You Hear About the Morgans, and 2 Weeks' Notice.
Indeed.
It's not a great screenplay, which is really ironic, because the film is about a teacher who's teaching screenplays and a guy who's supposedly good at them.
Exactly. He's a screenwriting professor, and for me it was impossible to not watch this film without thinking about you can't not watch it without thinking of the processes of screenwriting and thus critique the screenplay itself. But there's a bit in it where Hugh Grant's, like, one of the students is talking about their screenplay, and Hugh Grant is like, well, look at this character, it's one-dimensional, or someone's like, it's one-dimensional, this would never happen. And I was just like, what about the kid in your class then who's obsessed with fucking Star Wars? And it's literally, he can't say something that isn't a Star Wars reference. Like, that is so one-dimensional, and there's really nothing else there.
You're so right. And I wrote down in my notes, like, classic lazy rom-com moment with the nerdy kid. Like, the Hollywood nerdy kid. It's like Fergal in Superbad.
Yeah.
Like, is that his name?
Fergal.
But that's a good nerdy sort of role. But
Yeah.
it's like the classic Hollywood comedy where they have to have this, like, freak who can't do anything apart from, like, stumble over his own words and then get drunk and die nearly in hospital.
That was
so
a weird
lazy,
bit. That was a weird bit.
There are easier ways to get out of finishing your 3rd act, you know.
Mr. Michaels.
Hey.
Those guys just kept saying, one more, Obi-Wan, one more. They didn't want me in the frat. I'm such an idiot.
You are not an idiot, Billy. You're, you're weird, but half the successful people in Hollywood are weird. Talking of which, I was thinking about your screenplay, and I think if you love Star Wars, write Star Wars, but just give it a little twist. In fact, I think that could be...
Honey.
Mom, Dad.
Hi, I am Keith Michaels. I'm a teacher. I teach Billy, and I'll give you your privacy, yeah?
Thank you.
I think the best film to compare this to, or a good film at least to compare this to, would be About a Boy.
I was going to say exactly that, mate.
It's a very similar arc where you have a character, in both films it's Hugh Grant, he's a little bit off the rails.
Stuck in his ways,
a bit of a womanizer in both, maybe a bit of a party animal in both, a naughty boy in both of them. However, this film, do you know what's horrible? As I thought this earlier, it feels like the American version of About a Boy. So my big thing with About a Boy, those of you who've listened to the episode, if you haven't, go back and listen to it. It's pretty good. To contrast and compare with this one, is there are moments where there's darkness and the funny bits, they play really nicely off each other because one doesn't overtake the other, but both keep their gravity. You're finding it funny, but also there's moments where you're finding it dark and sad, but neither one wins out. This film, however, all the moments of darkness feel undercut by where it's meant to be funny.
It doesn't quite work. For me, it's just a bit off. Like, the general messaging around the film and the idea around the film is not bad necessarily. But, for example, the bit about his son, where he's upset about the fact that his son has lost contact with him and won't phone him back, etc. That comes in like an hour into the film. and you're kind of like, this is really random. And then also at the end of the film, he gets that sort of message from his son, and you're like, is that really the end of the film? Like, is it, I don't know, man. It's just like, yeah, it just doesn't quite work, and I don't know whether you're right. It's just this sort of I don't know. I don't know.
Well, I mean, the reason I say it is because there's points where I thought maybe the screenplay isn't even that bad. Like, part of what's kind of annoys me about it is just the score underneath the film, because that
the music sucks.
Well, the thing is, right, is that like obviously, as you know, everyone here will know this. Scenes can be completely changed in what they mean by the music underneath it, because there'll be happy music, sad music, blah blah blah. Go away, watch a scene with no music, and you yourself choose stuff to score to it. The meaning of the scene will change. The beginning of this film is so like happy clappy and fast paced, and like, oh, we're making jokes, and oh no, he's just said to the airport people that he's got a bomb in his bag, and oh, you're not supposed to do that. It's really, and then oh, he needs a new job because he's got no money, and oh, all of his lights just cut out because he's got no money, but somehow he's still on the Wi-Fi. I paused it and I looked at his computer and I thought, the Wi-Fi's still working. That wouldn't be true. Anyway, look something up, but it's like, and the thing is, I think in the editing room, that's where this film took a dark turn and went this way of sort of really, really like signposting their jokes and underpinning any seriousness with this happy clappy music and this sort of way of being like, hi, we're a rom-com and this is all fine and fluffy.
Sir, is this your bag?
Yeah.
We have to check it. What is this? Best original screenplay. Dude, you wrote Paradise Misplaced? Yo, Kevin, Ali, come here. This is Keith Michaels. He wrote Paradise Misplaced.
You wrote that? Yeah, a long time ago, but I did, yeah.
Oh, I love that movie, man. My kids love that movie.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Wow, look at this. I could have brought a bomb on board and no one would have minded.
Don't say that, that's not good.
You're so right. I'm sorry. I apologise. I used to know what was funny. Thank you.
So, one of the big conflicts in this film is between Hugh's character Keith, which, by the way, Hugh is not Keith. Let's just put.
No, that was a huge issue for me as well. What is that?
Yeah.
What is that?
So Hugh's character Keith, the sort of, I guess, the bad boy character in the film is Miss Weldon, who is the sort of old-fashioned, by-the-book teacher who is basically a bit of a Nazi, and Hugh and Hugh is obviously a bit nervous at the first drinks party with all the faculty. He's had a couple too many wines and starts making jokes about Jane Austen and says,
No, she's obviously brilliant. It's just I find it all a bit trivial, you know.
Really? Fascinating. How so?
Well, isn't it all, you know, who's going to the ball tonight? My corset is askew, however will I curtsy?
She comes back, obviously huge Jane Austen fan, and they have this little bit of a back and forth, and then suddenly Hugh starts saying that,
Just honestly, everything seems to be about female empowerment nowadays. You know, any meeting I go to in Hollywood, someone says, you know what we need? A kick-ass girl. That'll be a great twist. What would be truly innovative? A movie without a kick-ass girl. Or better yet, a movie where a woman gets her ass kicked.
Perhaps you'd like to kick mine.
Oh, don't be silly. I didn't mean literally. Besides, there's not much of a target there. Which I mean in a very nice way, because you're in great shape. You're svelte.
and then by mistake kind of touches her on the backside, which does not go down very well.
After he's referenced her backside and the size of it. Yeah. I just want this film to take itself seriously. I want this film to be about a guy who's off the rails and who does sleep with his students, who maybe has a drink problem, doesn't speak to his son. There's loads of stuff you can play on there. And so this scene should be a scene where you're looking on in horror, and not horror as in like, this is funny horror. You're looking on his horror as like, oh shit, this guy really is just a drunkard. Because he then starts going off and being like a little brat, being like, oh, everyone has a kick-ass woman in their film now. That's so shit. Blah, blah, poor old me. I've won an Oscar for my film, and I'm now being like, oh, it's so shit. They just want women all the time. And then talks about this woman's bum and almost touches it. I don't know, the film, because of the way it's structured and stuff, it makes you go, this is funny, what an idiot, rather than being like, this is deeply unsettling.
Well, you're listening to Hugh Grant taking Hugh for granted on the radio. Hugh Grant taking Hugh for granted, oh, the podcast show.
Maybe I think you picked up on something quite important in your previous point about this is the difference between an American and British rom-com, I think. And maybe why, like we said, Hugh's other rom-coms are so good, because there is that kind of seriousness about the films that's underpinned in comedy, whereas these films are sort of, they're meant to be funny, and that is the main emphasis of the film, and rather than the kind of dark sort of underlying problems that the characters have. The reality of this film is that they're like, we want people to laugh, and we don't really care about the rest of the messaging of the film, and therefore it just feels like light and without substance.
And I'm sure that if Marc Lawrence heard you say that, he doesn't have much hair, but what he did have, he'd tear out, and he'd be like, what are you talking about? That's not the case. But I'm like, sorry, mate, the way you've edited it and the way that you've constructed it makes me think that that's the case. About a Boy feels like a rom-com, but it isn't. There's no real romance in it. It's not like Hugh at the end of it gets with the kid's mum, Nicholas Holt's mum, or anything like that. But it's the redemption story, and the darkness in it, his mum, about Hugh, and about the kid, plays really well and plays really nicely with the funny moments. This film, it's so heavily weighted to the funny and the light that any darkness... And the thing is, you said it before when you talked about the scene in which he talks about his son. So Keith, that makes me sick to say that, Keith's son, they don't really speak as much anymore. And Keith's son has gone to university and he doesn't even know what he's taking at university. And he talks about, and it's quite a sweet moment in the film, he wrote his Oscar-winning screenplay, Paradise Misplaced, for his son who was worried about death.
So I invented a story about heaven to comfort him. He didn't really buy it, you know. He had so many brilliant and detailed questions that I had to refine my answers every night. And that turned into the story of two angels who watch a mission to take a soul to heaven and have to go to hell to get her back.
Paradise Misplaced.
Yeah. It was a fairy tale designed to make a 5-year-old boy go to sleep.
And it's actually a really heartfelt moment in the film that Hugh plays really fucking well. And I was like, oh shit, I've actually just felt something. And this film does have a little bit of substance, but it's so masked in everything else.
It's like washed out really by the sort of, maybe it's like the college thing. I don't know if it's the college thing.
I think it's just washed out by the stuff we said before. I mean, by the fact that this film is shrouded in cliche, and the whole thing just feels superficial and meant to be funny, but it really isn't.
There are a lot of scenes that are boring as well. For me, any of all the classroom scenes are really dull, and classroom scenes in general tend to be quite dull if they're done over and over and again. Like films with one classroom scene often are funny. Going back to the same place and kind of doing the same thing over again, I don't know, it doesn't work for me.
You're so right, and that's again talking about the one-dimensional, because the classroom is just filled with not characters but one-dimensional joke boxes,
one-liners. Yeah,
exactly. When they're all what is it Jack in a Box, and literally you're just, as the conversation's going up, you're just revving them all up, and then you just be like, right, it's your turn to speak, out you come, Jack in a Box. Oh, I mentioned Yoda. It's like, right, out you come, girl at the front. Oh, I'm really sad and I talk about depressing shit all the time. Oh, girl next to her, you're gonna play off her. What have you got to say? Oh, I'm talking about the bar mitzvah, and I'm talking about being Jewish, and everything I say is actually quite superficial, and I'm quite shallow, and I'm really happy and bright all the time. And I meant to literally, the girl who sat right next to me is really sad and thinks her life is shit, and we're meant to play off each other, and that's meant to be entertaining to watch.
And then Jack in the Box at the back, who's secretly in love with Hugh, and then the camera pans to their soppy face, and Hugh looks at them going,
Yeah, but the thing is, right, is that we're ragging on it quite a lot, but like Marisa Tomei, I think she's great in the film.
Yeah,
I actually think
she's good. Yeah,
she's good. And do you know what? We've seen so many rom-coms now with Hugh where the woman doesn't say anything and she's got no character. This girl has so much to say, and you really do get a sense of her character, and it's played quite well. So that's the thing, is like, I'm buying into those two characters, but then the film
sucks the life out of it.
Out of it, yeah. And you have everything around it is just kind of...
Yeah, Holly's character is great. You know, she teaches kids dancing. She makes money on the side by serving. You know, she's fun. She's got a nice smile. She's
optimistic.
And she has that kind of like determination to become a screenwriter. Like, there's a lot to like about her, and she's bubbly, and I think she's played well. But yeah, you're right. There's just something. The film is just like stops it sort of developing almost, and it's just like a bit.
Yeah, and I think maybe what you said before about the university setting might be an issue as well, actually, because I poo-pooed that at first, but no, I think you're right, and I think that plays into the cliche, because literally every time Hugh fucking leaves the university building, someone goes, Keith, Mr. Michaels, and then and then it's like, oh, and then they run over and they're like, oh, hey, thank God I caught you.
Mr. Michaels, Mr. Michaels, hi. Hi. Oh, I'm glad I caught you before the faculty reception. I'm Holly Carpenter.
Hello. And what do you teach, Holly?
No, I don't teach. I learn. I'm a sophomore.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you are? Oh, that's great. No, that's good. It's wonderful going back to school at your...
Height?
Yes, exactly.
Well, I thought that's what you meant.
It was. We're very simpatico.
Oh, I've got to tell you, I love Paradise Misplaced. I still watch it with my girls.
Oh, your girls. Are you a lesbian?
Oh, I wish. No, my daughters.
So, the way that I watched this film, Oscar, I watched it the other day. I went back home to see my mama. And she, you know, we got a lovely takeaway in, and we were thinking about what to watch. And she's a big fan of the podcast, Hello Mum. So me and Mum watched this film, got crunk, right? 3 o'clock in the morning.
Love that word.
Mum bursts into my room. But let's just say the alcohol hasn't worn off. And she comes in, she goes, Diggs, we've got to go and get your brother. His appendix have burst or whatever. And we've got to go sort him out. And there's that horrible moment where we both go, I'm still kind of drunk though. So let me tell you, this film will forevermore, I will remember it as the film that I watched and got me a bit pissed and also a bit, you know, analytically annoyed before I had to go and take my brother to hospital. Also, shout out to you, Gully. Yeah, get this, my brother's name is Gulliver. Diggory and Gulliver. So I'm sure some of our listeners, American listeners, will think that's absolutely brilliant.
Mate, I'm not going to lie. When I do the pod, most people were like, your friend's name is Diggory. Now, tell me a bit about that. I mean, maybe for our listeners, you should, because the only Diggory when I first met Diggory, the only Diggory I knew was, of course, Cedric Diggory from Harry Potter. Also, I mean, actually, in North America, Oscar is solely a pet's name.
Oh, no.
The only other Oscar I've met here is a cat. And so it's quite...
Who was delightful, to be fair.
One of my good friends has a cat called Oscar. And sometimes, like, they're messaging in the group chat and they're, like, saying Oscar. And I'm like, oh, they're talking about me. And then they're actually talking about the cat.
Yeah.
It's very disappointing.
Oscar's licking his bollocks again. And you're like, are they talking about me? What's going on here? It's like, oh, Oscar's just coughed up a furball. And you're like, I thought they wouldn't notice. Yeah. No, I mean, what else is there to say? I suppose my parents just have a kooky... You know, they're like everyone in this fucking film who literally can't talk for a fucking second without quoting Shakespeare, Jane Austen, fucking Star Wars. This is such a writer just like wanking off on a page being like, oh, look how much I know about literature and classic literature. It's just like, fuck off. Anyway, so my parents are exactly like that. And so Gulliver and Diggory, I'm named after someone in a Thomas Hardy book called Diggory Venn. I'm a beast keeper, I believe, or something like that.
Wow.
On the marshes. And apparently I'm quite a chill dude in it. I should really read it.
But then your sisters are fairly normal names. So what happened there? They just got bored.
Well, I like to say, one of my sisters is called Jess. Shout out to you, Jess. And also Flossie, big thing, shout out to you. I like to think that Jess, she was born on Christmas Day. So I like to say to people, Jess was called Jess because slap a U between the S's, Jesus.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah, exactly. That's good. Yeah. But to be fair, I'm saying that you have an odd name. It's not an odd name. It's a great name. But I also have the most stupid surname in the entire world. So when people see this podcast, they're like, Oscar Beardmore-Gray and Diggory Waite. I mean, like, that is just... Have they fucking made those names
The thing
up?
is, though, I like to think some of our North American listeners can't believe it. They probably think they've walked into Harry Potter or a boarding school, which, to be fair, they almost have with us anyway. I mean, that's like, they'll look at our names and think, Diggory and Oscar Beardmore-Gray. Oh, my God, I've hit the jackpot. This is exactly the kind of British podcast I want to be listening to.
All you have to do is give us a wand and a Gryffindor cloak, and we're ready to go.
Yeah, or some sort of paddle to beat each other with at our boarding school that's terribly Victorian. And then British people who think, you know, I was talking to someone recently. I told them about the podcast, and they were like, "This is just two posh British boys talking about how posh and British this big famous actor is." And I was like, "Well, fuck, yeah, you're right, but
don't call us out, you dick.
Don't belittle the podcast. At least someone's doing it. We're doing a bloody service here."
Taking he for granted. Taking he for granted. Taking he for granted. What did you think, lads? Were they taking he for granted?
Oscar, is this film, the rewrite, taking Hugh for granted?
Diggory, this film, I'm going to say not really. Not really. I would say it's a little bit of a blip in the Hugh naissance.
Yeah.
Don't love Hugh's character. Not his fault. Don't love the way he plays it. Kind of his fault. And don't love the film, which is not his fault. You know, there's some bits I like in the Hugh naissance in the film that sort of mirrors the Hugh naissance. He got his pointing hand, which I picked up on, which he does a lot in The Gentleman. And there are some nice moments. But I don't think this is necessarily Hugh's fault. I don't think he can do much more than he's given here. That's my general opinion. Like, he does his best job. There's some compelling moments. There's some nice bits. But in general, the film is just a sort of 3 out of 10, 3 out of 10, 3 out of 5, 3-star, whatever you want to call it. It's not great. So, yeah. That's my thoughts.
I would have to agree with you. Alison Janney, who plays the head of the ethics committee, Mary Wheeldon, who was previously described in this podcast as a Nazi. The actor who plays her loves Hugh Grant, and literally she was like, "This is why I've done the movie." And I was thinking for her, she would watch this film and she said in the interview, she said, "Look, he's great in everything he's in." And I don't think that's untrue in this film. I think Hugh is good. Hugh is a ray of light in this film, as is his opposite, Marisa, or
Holly,
yeah. But as is well documented in this episode, poor screenplay, poor implementation. This film will be maximum 3 stars. It's complete popcorn. It is a blip in the Hugh naissance. We know the films he can do is a lot better than this. And for that reason, I'm out.
And it needs a rewrite.
Nice,
Sorry.
Dude. Nice. Love that. Well, as always, apologies for this one. It's another sad one in some ways. But thank you so much for listening. And like I say, get in contact. Tweet us. Instagram us. Let us know where you're listening from, how you found us, and what you think of the podcast.
Yeah, we've had all kinds of messages from across the world. We've expanded into Japan, Argentina, Italy, Germany. Wherever you're listening to the pod, we appreciate it. And, you know, we've had messages in Spanish that don't make any sense.
Yeah.
We've had messages from adoring fans in Florida who are worried about how we're going to review the next film. But all we can say is thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
See you very soon. Cheers, guys.
Bye.
Taking Hugh for Granted is produced, edited and presented by Diggory Waite and Oscar Beardmore-Gray. The producers of Taking Hugh for Granted would like to state that this podcast is in no way associated with the actor Hugh John Mungo Grant, nor does it endorse his views or represent him in any way. Instead, by creating this podcast, Oscar and Diggory hope to celebrate Hugh's illustrious career, reliving his old classics and shedding light on some of his hidden gems. Hugh, if you're listening, we hope you approve.